All right, Matt, I have a big confession to make.
Ooh, confessions. I love those.
I don't have a formal written business plan.
You're going out of business?
I think so.
Okay.
Um, and in here, let me tell you why. So I have a formal written marketing plan, which my marketing plans include some aspects that would be on a business plan, but it's mostly because I believe that the purpose of a business plan is to, get funding, um, get a loan if I need a loan. And whenever I started my business, I didn't need any of that. I didn't start with any of that. Um, so correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the purpose of a business plan, or am I doing it all wrong?
Well, I think that for every entrepreneur, the answer is going to be different, and I hate that answer to a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just segment different types of businesses and business owners, right? If
Okay.
you are a publicly traded company, I'm sure you're going to get reamed by your shareholders if you said something like that, right?
Yeah.
Um, in my experience,
If I went to the board meeting and said, "Guys, I have something to tell you."
zero business plan. I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. Now, there may be days where that's actually true, but but you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to say that out loud, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but dealing with like in my experience in investing in private equity, I've read I don't know hundreds. I don't want to say thousands, but I've read a lot of maybe it is thousands. I don't know. Of business plans or investment proposals or executive summaries or things like that nature. What some people would call a business plan. But those are also for businesses that, while they are kind of like created like overnight, these are professionals. I mean, these are put together by professionals that have done these types of projects before, and all they're doing is saying to investors, "I know my stuff. Here's how we're going to do it." Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that I've seen that in projects as small as $10 million, as big as $500 million projects, $1 billion projects. Seen it all. That's really what that's for.
Mm-hmm.
But
So let's.
well,
Oh,
I was going to
go
say,
ahead.
well, and it's totally different, right? I've kind of talked about the highest level, I would say, where this really matters. Not say it doesn't matter, but if you're like a startup, like you just said, hey, I'm just starting my business. I'm a solopreneur. I think that you not or anyone not having a business plan is probably okay. And the reason I say that is when you just get started, your first job is to get business. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
it. And the market is going to respond in some way, shape, or form. Either what you thought was a good idea isn't, and you're going to need to immediately pivot, or you're going to find a niche that really needs and wants what you're offering, and you're going to thrive. And I would
Mm-hmm.
say for most entrepreneurs, it's like, why do most businesses fail in like 2 to 3 years? Well, they could have been too rigid to their business plan. They didn't pivot enough. They didn't get enough feedback from what the market wanted. It could have been that
Mm-hmm.
the owner was too focused on what they thought that people wanted and not really listening to what the customers really want. Um, that's a big reason why a lot of businesses fail. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why businesses fail, but I think that that is a contributing factor where there is a certain degree where you need to be nimble. And if you're a solopreneur or in those early kind of startup phase where you have maybe a handful of employees, you might not even have employees. You may have a lot of like contractors that you work with.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't need that deep of a formal business plan, other than unless you're trying to get some type of lender funding and they're going to want to at least see something. So
Mm-hmm. Well, so if someone, so let's just think of a startup. If a startup is getting funding, whether it be a loan, private equity, venture capital, whatever it might be, um, what are some of the things that should be included in their business plan?
that is a great question, and it's funny. Uh, I think the more I get this type of question, I think of what Warren Buffett says, which is effectively every business plan is effectively just made up numbers, and it's going to support whatever it is the author is going to say about it. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to tell you why this business is the best business there is in the world, how they have this amazing, unique competitive advantage that no one else is able to tap, and that because of these things, that this business is going to grow rapidly, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are several businesses that actually happens, but there's also uh, statistics are going to say that most of them aren't. The reality is there's only a handful of real industries, and there's only a handful of really unique opportunities. And I'm not the one building rockets to space. I mean, I would say that's a pretty unique opportunity. There's only a handful of, even now there's a handful of competitors in there, right? It's not just SpaceX. Other Blue Horizon, I think, is Bezos, and I think Virgin Galactic's got something. Different, varying degrees of that, but you kind of get where I'm going with this. Is, there's only really a handful of really unique opportunities, and the rest of it is just the economics of, are you really in a good business area? Do you have a good business mind, and are you able to outcompete and outwork your competitors? That's what it's going to come down to. So as the world gets smaller, and what I mean by that is as there's more and more information, more analytics, there's more data, it's going to be harder for people to compete on being unique. And I need to work on the phrasing of that, but you kind of get the idea where a lot of these ideas are already thought up of. What you're really doing is you're combining 2 or 3 ideas to make something, you're putting a twist on something that may not have been done before. And that's really where you're going to find some type of uniqueness. And if you exploit that fast enough and build it up quick enough, then you might own a space for at least a little while until you get more competitors.
So do you think, like, when starting out, a business should focus on maybe like a shorter business plan? So a lot of business plan templates out there are like 10 pages long, and I think that's why a lot of business, and honestly probably that's what deterred me, at least like on the latest round. I have built a business or created a business plan before, but it isn't for either of my current companies. It is for a product company I had, and it's because I was looking at securing funding, and that's the only one that I did, and I hated the entire process, and I think it's because of how long it was. But I did put a lot of effort into it. So, is there a rule or a trend that you see about the length of a business plan, or does it even matter?
The length of a business plan is it needs to be as long as it needs to be, right? Whether it's 1 page or 50 pages. I've heard it kind of called, and this is not a sexist thing, but it's kind of the skirt example, where it needs to be long enough to cover what it needs to cover, but short enough to to leave some to the imagination. So you can kind of take that in hand, and then of course once you deliver it, if they have more questions, which is like all the time, they're going to ask you, "Hey, can you expand on this? Can you dive more into it?" But you don't want to spend all this time spinning your wheels in a section of the plan that the lender doesn't care about. Now, you really need to be careful whenever you're taking anyone else's money, right? So if it's your own capital and you're taking the risk, I think that's one thing, right? This is America. It's capitalism. That is how entrepreneurism works, right? You got to take a risk. But when you're taking other people's money, that's where you need to be very, first of all, clear, open, and honest about where you're at, right? And coming, again, from an investment background, like, your word is your bond, right? And if you, you could burn relationships and you'll never see investor capital again. Well, you know what I mean? You might not be the kind that you want, right?
Sure.
So there are, once you're actually taking other people's money, you have a fiduciary responsibility to those people to deliver what you're saying that you're going to deliver. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be so rigid that, if everyone's telling you, I want blue widgets, and you're only producing red, like, make the switch to blue. Come on. Right? But, you also don't want to take it and then do something completely, it's a real estate project, but actually you're going to put it into producing widgets, right? I mean, I think you need to have some flexibility, but you need to be very careful. And, of course, if you're not certain, consult an attorney is what I would say. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of medicine or something like that.
Nice. I've never heard that. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of medicine. Cool.
Yeah, I think that's actually a real health quotes. It's been around for hundreds of years, but
nice. Well, here I thought you coined it. Well, there we go. So there's a lot of I don't want to say speculation when you're creating a business plan, but there's some research there. You're explaining the market, you're explaining your opportunity and stuff. And so we would call that market research, right? And I feel like that phrase alone, market research,
is a loaded
scares people. Because there are market research firms that will charge, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to do market research for your business. And they come out and will tell you, well, they solicit your business before you even realize that you need or know what market research is. So what are some ways that business owners can do market research on their own for free or cheap?
Sure. And I'm going to assume that this is definitely on the earlier stage of a startup or a smaller type of operation, because again, in those $10 million plus ventures, the market research is done by professionals, right? I mean, there is a lot of solid data, but I would say the first thing you got to do is, first of all, know yourself and your product, but also know your competitors, right? So let's say, for example, I don't know, give me some type of commodity. YouTube channels.
Let's see.
Let's just go with YouTube channels for a second, right? Because a lot of people want to be YouTube stars, okay?
All right.
If you're doing market research, one of the things you should be doing is figuring out what other channels are out there that you're trying to compete with or have a say in the conversation with, right? So I have recently got into the whole smart home thing, right? I bought another house, we just moved in, and I'm all about I want to upgrade everything to smart switches and smart doorbells and video, you name it, right? All the bells and whistles. And so when you do a YouTube search, first of all, I'm looking for a very particular niche within that community. So I know there are different types of hubs, and I'm not trying to get into which is the best hub, but based on the hub that I want to build my system on, there are a handful of creators or content creators that specialize only in, they built their smart home in that particular niche. That's great, okay? Now, within that, if I wanted to enter that space, and I have no intention of doing that, but if I did, what I would do is I would probably watch, several of their videos to understand who the players are. I would probably go to their pages. I'd find out what's their most viewed content. And after I watched those videos, I'd probably go into the comments section and look at all the comments and questions that people ask in their comments. Because that tells me that these people have not addressed this particular question, at least in that video, right? So if I was going to create a video on that particular subject, and let's just use switches for a second because I just mentioned switches, I would probably go into their videos, watch their videos on switches. I would find different products and try to figure out how can I make a unique video about this. Maybe they're talking about the top 3, but they didn't explore the top 5, or maybe they didn't say, hey, here's the best budget friendly option. Everyone just talks about the most expensive options, right? Or maybe they didn't talk about the ultra premium. right? So a $20 switch is different than a $60 switch versus a $120 switch, right? So a lot of the conversation is at the $60 switch, but there is some around the 20. So I might go in and say, hey, there's this whole other market, the ultra high end, right, or the higher end. Let's talk about that, and how does this compare to the other switches, right? That is one way to do the research, right? Where you're going in by yourself, looking at your competitors, looking at what they're offering, you're looking at the feedback from the market, and you're going to hear me say a lot about that, right? You want to hear the feedback of the market, and then you want to deliver a product or service that addresses that. Now, you may have a particular product that is part of that commodity. Maybe you're not. Maybe you actually produce switches. I don't know, right? And your switch is like a $40 or $50 switch, and you're not sure kind of what you should be saying about it, right? Well, by doing this type of research, you want to really package that as the solution for what other people are looking for. You know what? Here are some of the problems with these $60 switches or these $20 switches, but this particular product, right, is going to solve these problems. And that's where people really look for leadership, like, do you really know what you're doing and can you guide them to the right solution? And then also, it's your positioning, right? You're positioning yourself as the authority, and so that's going to bring trust and credibility, and then ultimately that's going to bring some type of result. So when you're talking about market research, whether it's for apartment complexes, and I actually used to do this when I first got into, not into business, but after college, I was doing market research for an investment property group, and I would call up we'd have a client who was thinking about selling their apartment complex, and I'd look up all the apartment complexes in the area, and then I would call every single one, and I'd try to find out their vacancy rate, their current rents, concessions, things like that. Maybe they had amenities that were different. So I'd try to compile all that information. And again, it was just me. That's what they hired me to do, right? And then I would put it into their spreadsheet and programs, and the program would help them determine price. So you can do it. Anyone can do it. It doesn't. You don't need to pay tens of thousands of dollars. Now, if you're doing like $100 million project, yeah, you're probably going to need to spend that kind of money, right? Investors are going to want to see that. But if you're just like in the earlier stages, the best thing you can do is sometimes just get on the phone or get on the internet, and don't just listen to what other people are telling you. Formulate your own unique opinion. And so I do this all the time when it comes to like my financial planning practice. When I take a look at people's investments, I before I even look at how they're invested, I have already, through the interview process and thought about it and all these different things, thought about what strategy would fit best for this person. So I formulate that opinion all on my own, and then I happen to look at what they're currently doing. More often than not, it doesn't fit exactly what I'm recommending, but that's where you can have a conversation. So based on what you're doing, I could say, hey, here's what I think you should be doing. Here's what you're currently doing, and obviously you can see that there's a difference, right? Here's why I think this is a fit for you based on what you're telling me you're experiencing, what your goals are, right? So same thing with market research. You want to find the gap between what your competitors are doing or saying, what the market is asking for, and then you need to fill that gap. And that's where value comes in.
Perfect. You mentioned, like, as part of market analysis, looking into your competitors or market research, and then it made me think about a competitive analysis in a business plan. I'm pretty sure that's a page or a section generally. What are some things that business owners should look into as far as that goes, and what would investors or banks want to see in a competitive analysis? And does that mean like doing a SWOT analysis on your competitors, or
that's what I was about to say? Is at its most at the most basic level, it's a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really at the heart of doesn't matter how you dress it up. It's some version of that, right? And
Sure.
I could tell
Yeah.
you about, this is not investment advice. Like one of the most recent ones that I've been reading, and my firm and clients are investing in, where they're going to talk about what's the opportunity, right? Well, in this particular marketplace, and this is actually in rentals, that a particular community is underserved, and they have all the data on, in the last 7 years, most of the new buildings have been on the luxury end of the market. That's where most of the profits have been, and that has created this gap where in this particular marketplace there's not enough worker level housing or affordable housing, right? And so because of this gap, right, this is part of the competitive analysis, right? You want to know what all your other competitors are doing, and you want to go somewhere that's unique and different, right? Well, hey, there is a lot of demand for this. There's just not enough housing, period, for the need, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to build and create housing for this particular need. They're actually building like 10 different neighborhoods, right? Or 10 different developments. So that's an example of competitive analysis where you might be looking at the market saying, hey, everyone is doing one thing, but because of that, we've completely left an opportunity open for a different segment of the market, and that's what we want to attack. So at its most basic level, competitive analysis is some version of a SWOT analysis. It's really, what is the opportunity? Ultimately, that's what you need to answer, or explain to investors or lenders. What's the opportunity? Why do you believe you're going to be successful by exploiting that particular opportunity?
Perfect. All right. Well, I think that's all the time that we have. Hopefully, you learned a lot about a business plan, have been able to decide if this is something for you, if your business needs it right now, maybe it needs it later. And then hopefully you'll be able to put that into action. Until next time, this is the Business Rundown. We will see you.
Cheers.